frameworks and the template pattern. We just mentioned earlier that the template pattern is basically a precursor to frameworks. So it's worth our while to look at frameworks in a little bit of depth. Frameworks are extremely interesting and you can do a huge load of things with very little code if you use frameworks. So let's take a look at frameworks and how they can help us. And you'll see the little bit of template pattern within a framework and how that fundamental design principle has been used to make something really cool. Now, if you wanted to travel a really short distance, what would you do? You walk. So walking is a very normal mode of transportation when you want to go a short distance. If you want to travel really far, you fly. So you fly on a plane when you want to go really long distances. Now, if you want to code up something small, typically what you do as a programmer is to code it up from scratch. Every line of code within that little program will be written by you. However, if you want to build something really big and code up something complicated, you would use a framework. You would not write it from scratch. Instead, you take the help of a framework to build something big so you don't have to do every little thing yourself. What is a framework? A framework is a complicated collection of interconnected classes. These classes interact with each other in complicated ways in order to provide you a functionality where you can build something big with very little code. Similarly, planes are complicated collections of interconnected machinery. This collection of machinery which makes up a plane allows you to do something really awesome like fly to a really far off land. Using a framework gives way more power but a lot less control than coding from scratch. So the trade-off that a framework makes with you is that you have way more power, you can build big things really quickly. However, you have a lot less control than if you had coded from scratch. Similarly, flying a plane gives you enormous power. It's a huge achievement. You travel thousands of miles in a couple of hours. But a little less control than walking. You can't suddenly decide on the fly to go somewhere else. You can't decide every bit of your route if you are flying a plane. Now, there are a whole bunch of challenges in using a framework, but a really important one is understanding how the different classes and events in the framework interact with each other. The way you make a framework work is by hooking into these interactions at the right places. So it's important for you to really understand when events are fired, how do these classes interact. The internal details of these interactions are important for you to know so you can hook into it correctly. Similarly, while flying a plane, a big part of the challenge is understanding how the machinery and systems interact with each other. What is the information they are trying to convey? How are they working together and what can go wrong? All of these are very important to know when you fly a plane. See how flying a plane and using a framework is very alike? Let's see some more examples of how they are similar. So in order to fly a plane, you first need to dress the part. Then You need to get the little details right while interacting with the machinery, and you trust that if you've done your part well, the plane will do the rest. There is fundamental trust involved that if you do your bit right, the plane will as well.
Lieutenant, what's the first thing you do in the cockpit after checking Form 1A?
Flip on the battery switches.
Wrong. The first thing you do is adjust your seat so that your eye level hits the center of the windshield. Now those battery switches.
Landing gear next, sir? Right. Latch down and lock. Check. Pressure up 500 pounds. Check. Neutralize landing gear and flap levers. Check. Light green. Check. Horn operation.
Here it is.
Check. Autopilot hydraulic valve off.
Check.
We need to listen to the plane as well. We need to watch the controls, pay attention to the environment, and have all these indicators which give us information. We need to listen and watch them and respond accordingly.
I'm going to start the left engine. With a fuel pressure of 10 pounds, momentarily move mixture control out of idle cutoff position to rich. This facilitates priming. You then operate the starters by moving left starter switch and safety switch up to start. When the starter has reached speed, pull down on both switches.
Right, sir.
Mesh. As soon as this engine fires, move mixture control immediately to auto rich and pull back on the throttle. Keep the wobble pump working until the engine is functioning smoothly. Don't work it up and down too fast. Idle the engine to between 600 and 800 RPM until the oil pressure shows on the gauge. Pressure up, sir. You then adjust the throttle to 1,000 RPM. Stop the engine if oil pressure doesn't respond within 30 seconds. Now you start the right engine.
Now that we've seen the stuff involved in flying a plane, let's see what we need to do to use a framework. The very first thing is to dress the part. There are a whole bunch of interfaces that the framework provides, and we need to override class methods to perform the actions that we want to. Use of these interfaces and overriding class methods are very important parts of plugging into a framework. So we dress the part. Then we need to get the little details right. Integrating with a framework involves a whole bunch of boilerplate code and a lot of little things which have to be exactly so the framework understands what you're trying to accomplish. We get these right, and then we trust the framework to do the right thing. The framework will take care of things and handle things correctly, provided we get the little details right. Lastly, we need to listen to the framework. These we do by setting up listeners on events that the framework fire and responding accordingly. Frameworks fire a whole bunch of events indicating certain actions or certain things have occurred. We need to listen on these events and respond. Now, we've used the terms event and listen a few times, and since these are really important, it bears repeating. Listeners and events form the crux of integrating with a framework. So, listening on events is an important part of using frameworks correctly. Listening on events is how you hook into the framework and provide customizations and logic to specify how you want to handle things in your code. We've already spoken of what a framework is made up of. A framework is a complicated collection of interconnected classes which work together cohesively to help you achieve your objective. Now, how do you work with the framework? You do little bits of boilerplate stuff and to get the framework to do its thing. This little bit of boilerplate basically kind of kickstarts the framework to perform a whole bunch of actions under the scenes or behind the scenes. Once you've got your little bits of boilerplate in, you wait for the framework to say to you, there is this specific piece of logic that only you can take care of. Here it is for your attention. Please do what you need to do with this piece of information so you can accomplish what you've set out to do. This is important, so I'm going to repeat it. At various points in time, based on a certain set of actions, the framework will basically hand over control to you, to your code, which you've used to plug into the framework, saying, here is the context, please do what you need to do at this point. The specific bit or the specific point in time where the framework hands over control to you is called an event. And the place where you, the programmer, stand by waiting for this event and decide how to react to this event is called the listener. So once you have this event, that's the point where the framework hands over control to you. You use the listener to react to this event. You as a programmer are plugging into the framework to achieve your own objectives. The framework has no idea of what your objective is. The framework has no way to tell what specific events are important to you and need your intervention. So basically what it does, it provides a way for you to listen to whatever events matter to you. It's basically the framework saying, I know about a whole bunch of events. I don't know what you're interested in. Why don't you tell me? And this you do by registering to listen on an event. The process of signing up for updates to a particular event is called registering on an event. The framework now knows what it is that you're interested in. When the event actually occurs, the framework will call the listener code and pass it an object with the details of what just happened. In order for you to be effective in your listener code, you need some context surrounding the event. You need to know what happened. This the framework does by passing you something that's called an event object. This event object contains all the context that you need within your listener to respond to the event correctly. Listeners typically tend to be an anonymous inner class which implements a specific interface. This interface generally has one method which takes in an event object. So the framework now knows how to pass in the event object to the event listener. This whole setup of having a framework, plugging into it using listeners, receiving events and executing the listener code is a precursor to the observer pattern.